All right, we're live.
All righty. Well, welcome back, everybody. We are going to be looking at John chapter 3, starting at verse 22 today. We're going to be looking at John's second testimony. And Dave, I believe you had said you were going to read that section, right?
Yep.
John 3, starting at verse 22.
We'll give her a whirl. After these things, Jesus and his disciples came into the land of Judea. There he remained with them and baptized. Now John was baptizing in Aenon near Salem, because there was much water there. And they came and were baptized, for John had not yet been thrown into prison. Then there arose a dispute among some of John's disciples and the Jews about purification. And they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who is with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him. John answered and said, A man can receive nothing unless it has been given to him from heaven. You yourselves bear me witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is fulfilled. He must increase, but I must decrease. He who comes from above is above all. He who is of the earth is earthly and speaks of the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. And what has been seen and heard that he testifies, and no one receives his testimony. He who has received his testimony has certified that God is true. For he whom God has sent speaks the words of God, for God does not give the Spirit by measure. The Father loves the Son and has given all things unto his hand. He who believes in the Son has everlasting life, and he who does not believe the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God abides in him.
All right. Very good. So as we read there, John was baptizing in Aenon near Salem. And so as we read there, what kind of conclusions can we draw there? Why was he doing that?
Well, we've talked about it before about, why was he baptizing in that area? It says there because there was much water there. Mm-hmm. Well, what do you need much water for?
For immersing.
For immersing people.
Yeah.
That's why he said, there's a lot of water over there. That's why, and what I'm going to be doing requires a lot of water.
Right.
So.
That kind of, again, it kind of flies in the face of what maybe the common, everyday, present-day definition of the word baptism, which can be confused. You need much water to do that. You can't do that with a little pot and a sprinkler.
Yeah, we see that all over when we're wondering what mode of baptism was practiced in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. I mean, it always requires a bunch of water, right. Or they had to go, or it says, they went down into the water.
Absolutely.
It always bears out that it was an immersion.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so what testimony did John give of Christ?
I mean, he talks about Christ increasing. That started, because some of John's disciples came up to him and said, hey, John. Yeah. He goes, there's this fella down here who's trying to take your gig.
Right.
Right? He's trying to do what you're doing.
Right.
And I wonder if John's disciples were like, we're going to get him, and there's going to be a throwdown or something.
Again, we possibly have that human interpretation of the situation, where they're thinking territory or something, like they're salesmen or something.
I kind of get that out of that. Mm-hmm.
I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, that stands to reason.
He says, "Behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him." And there's an exclamation point.
Right. Reminds me of my time in driving school. I worked for a place one time that we used to call around and see what the prices were. Even drove around to look and see how many kids were in the class over at this school versus this school to keep track of things. Yeah, so there's that competition type of feel, and that's of course not what Christ had in mind. And John said just that.
He set him straight.
Yeah,
he answered. Who did he give the credit to?
To the Lord.
To God. Yeah, absolutely.
So when when one believes in the Son, what happens? And that, speaking of this baptism, and speaking of the belief, when one believes, they
put that into action.
Right, and they have that opportunity for everlasting life, for eternal life.
Yeah, and James wrote that that faith is perfected by obedience. And we can't forget that.
Right.
Faith without obedience is dead. It means nothing.
Right.
We have to have both of those things. That's interwoven throughout the scriptures. And just in so many places.
It's true. And when we have the question here, what does it mean to believe on Jesus?
Well, if I believe that if I drive, now we live in the United States, if I drive on the left side of the road, I'm probably going to meet some oncoming traffic head on. I believe that. And that belief makes me drive on the right side of the road. It's my belief that if I drive down the wrong side of the road, I'm going to get, that's why I don't do that.
Right.
It's my belief put into action.
Again, it goes to that belief. It necessarily leads to an action because you know who Christ is, and you understand what His will is through looking into His Word, and it's to believe on Jesus is to be obedient.
It
to
is.
be obedient
it is.
to Him.
Yeah, it's. I guess that's more than just saying something. You'll see like somebody will say, "Well, just say this prayer,
right,
and you're going to be saved." But never in the Bible is anybody saved that way.
Right.
I mean, it's something that people made up. What do they call that? Oh, the sinner's prayer.
Right.
That's the most unbiblical thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I heard one preacher use the term. It's a devilish doctrine, and
it is,
and that's a pretty good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, if you just read it and then try to find something in the New Testament that's similar to that, you won't find it.
Right. Yeah. There's is belief obviously is the mental assent I understand who Christ is, that is,
it's foundational.
Yeah. But that's not it.
It's not it.
Yeah.
There is nothing, like I said, there is nothing alone said to save man.
Even even demons believe and tremble. Even what was it, we are legion, when Christ cast
he cast the into the swine.
Right. And they understood who he was.
Yes.
But are they saved?
Apparently not.
No.
They ran into the sea.
Right.
So one thing here, and at the end of this in John chapter 3 here, he talks about Jesus and his place in all things. And he says that he who comes from heaven is above all. And as we talked about at the beginning of John, where, we read that Jesus is the creator, and we are his creation.
Right. And it goes back to authority. We get to that all the time. And you just can't. I'm flipping forward in my notes here. I wrote at the top of one of the pages, authority, 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 with an exclamation point, because it is a recurring theme. And really, unless you grasp who Christ is and that he has all authority, that he is above all, then you're in a dangerous place, because you're trying to pull something. If you're doing anything other than what the Lord has said needs to be done, then you're allowing some other authority into the mix, and we have no biblical foundation to do that.
I always use the example with my kids. When I tell my kids to do something, I expect them to do what I told them to do.
Right.
Not to do a bunch of other things I didn't ask them to do.
Right.
To go beyond or fall short of. my kids know that if I just do what Dad asked me to do, that's good enough. I don't have to go beyond it, and I better not fall short of it. And I'm going to be completely satisfied with that.
Right. Yeah. If you have a wood project in the works, and you tell your son to sand the wood project, but then he decides after that, okay, well, I've sanded. I think Dad would like it if I go ahead and paint this, and he paints it purple.
Yeah.
And you had planned on staining it with a natural stain.
Right.
And while that would have been well-meaning to paint it purple, he didn't have the authority to do so, nor did he have the mind of the master, so to speak,
right,
as to what was to take place with that piece.
Right. In the same way with God. God has told us what to do. And we're not to fall short. We need to do what God has said, but also we're not to go beyond that. We're not to start adding to all these things.
Right.
And that's really what he kind of speaks of, all of those things. That's why he says, he who believes in the Son has everlasting life, and he who does not believe in the life shall not see life, but the wrath of God abides in him. It all talks about, us following after Jesus, us respecting his authority.
Absolutely. Well, maybe we can move on to John chapter 4. And John chapter 4, verses 1 through 54, is really where the text comes from. And
we're probably not going to get through all of that.
I don't even know that we need to read all of that necessarily out loud at this time, but I would encourage you to maybe if you're not familiar with John chapter 4, then by all means please pause and go read through that, and maybe we can continue and talk a little bit about it and read bits and pieces as we go.
Maybe we should read the first 20 verses or so, and we'll talk about
the first 20.
Yeah, I think the first 26. We'll talk about the Samaritan woman.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read that.
Okay,
since you did the last bit of reading, and by all means, turn in your Bibles and follow along. Don't take our word for it.
As LeVar Burton once said.
That's exactly where my mind was going. We were well indoctrinated children of the 80s. PBS. All right, John chapter 4, starting at verse 1. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as the sons of his livestock?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water, springing up into everlasting life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have well said, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly." The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We know that we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he.
Okay. Let's unpack some of that stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. So Jesus, leaves John, and he's going up to Galilee, and he decides to go through Samaria. And from what I remember, I guess that saved about 3 days in time walking through that area. But like most Jews would not do that because they just hated the Samaritans.
Right.
And do you remember why they hated the Samaritans?
I don't off the top of my head.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what I know about it. I guess the Samaritans, they were like, when Babylon came through and took away all the Jews into captive back in the Old Testament. Well, apparently they didn't take all of the Jews. They only took the good Jews. The Jews that weren't so good, the lower echelons of society, they left those people there. And then they moved some of their people into that area. And those people intermarried. And that's where the Samaritans came from. So they were like, half Jewish, I guess you would say. And the quote unquote pure Jews looked down upon them because they didn't like them. Also, the Samaritans, I believe, only believed in the 5 books of Moses. I think that was another thing. Okay. So they didn't go with the rest of the Old Testament. So just the Pentateuch is the only thing that they believed in.
Right.
So all of these peculiar things with them, plus they worshipped on this mountain, and all these things, and the Jews just despised them.
Right. And here Christ is talking freely with them, and that you see some parallels to today and how mankind likes to create these divisions. And some will even call Christianity divisive. But in reality, and there may be some that call themselves Christians that are extremely divisive. But when we look into the scriptures and we see the example of Christ, he was kind of all inclusive, wasn't he? And he desired that all men would come to the knowledge of truth.
Yeah.
And that's what he was sent for.
Yeah, so he goes to Samaria, this area that most of the Jews would never go to. And he comes into this city called Sychar. And Jacob's well is there, so that's where he's at. So this is an old well.
Right.
I mean, you're talking what? 1,500 years old at this point? That's an old well. I don't think we have anything like that in our country.
Right.
Or at least, it'd be hard to prove.
Right. Well, yeah, we have some old places in this. I think we're finding that we have older places than we thought.
Yeah.
In this part of the world, but in general, yeah, that's the beginnings of civilization, over in this area.
It is.
And the beginnings of civilization, the beginnings of man.
Yeah. So Jesus is thirsty, and he asks this woman for a drink. And now I'm gonna stir the pot here a little. Oh, good.
So and why would he ask the woman to give him a drink? Is that her place in life to give him a drink? Was he thinking in that?
I don't think that. I think it's because that he didn't have anything to get water.
Right.
With.
She said that later.
Yes.
That you have nothing to draw with.
Yeah.
So that's something that, and I was kind of playing devil's advocate there, trying to put Dave on the spot, but people will point to something like this, and this is, we live in a day and time where people are trying to, unwittingly, or trying to disprove the scriptures. They will say something like, well, that's just awful that Christ would just expect the woman to draw him water. But when we read a little further, we see that, well, he didn't have anything to draw with. Right. And that would have been the customary good thing to do,
That, and on top of this, he created this woman.
Right. True. So just a little sidebar free of charge there. Into my thought processes. But as we look at this, what was... well, did you have anything else to say about that?
Well, I was just going to go straight into the living water.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the next, I guess, bullet point here.
Yeah.
Where he talks about this living water, and she's confused about it. Just like Nicodemus was confused about some of the things that Christ was saying.
And there's that foreshadowing to, now, in retrospect, we can look back through the scriptures and we can point exactly to what that living water is.
Yes.
And this was a new statement,
As we've talked about before, all of these things are pointing towards what salvation's going to be.
Right.
Oh, they're clues to what salvation's going to be. They're not things that are spelling out what salvation is.
Right. And when you put all these clues together, you can see how orderly the plan is. You can see that all these things were pointed to. Take into account all of the prophecies that had come to fruition, and you just can't get over that. I mean, it's way too complex to just be chance. These things were planned from the beginning.
And of course, water is another theme here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's a constant theme throughout this.
Right.
This idea of water being involved in all of these examples he keeps giving.
Think of mankind being preserved through the ark.
Yeah.
And water, cleansing the world, so to speak, and then you have God's people, Israel, being saved by water at the parting of the Red Sea.
Through the sea.
Yeah, and here again you have God's people being saved through this living water that Christ speaks of.
Yep. So Jesus talks about whoever drinks of this water will thirst. So he's talking about a physical water, but then he talks about a spiritual water, and of course, this is looking towards, the kingdom of God.
Right.
So,
yeah.
What else do we have in here, John?
We'll
finish this episode.
I guess we can mention that why had John been placed in prison?
Because he was talking ill of Herod.
Yeah, he reproved Herod.
Yeah, who had his brother's wife.
Right. Yeah, he was telling him that you shouldn't do those things, and that's pretty gutsy to say that in front of a king.
Oh yeah,
so to speak. And but
it needed to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he was put in prison because of that. John didn't hold back. He told the truth. He was, again, there's a lesson in that. When you're faced with those around you that need to be told the truth. Maybe it's someone that you revere. Maybe it's someone who is of a high station in your life. Maybe it's a boss at work. Maybe it's somebody within the church.
Oh yeah, that can be even harder.
Yeah, and John didn't hold back. Neither should we. We need to be those that are willing to tell one another when we fall short, and there's good lessons in that.
Towards the end here, he talks about, he asks this woman, he says, "Hey, go get your husband." And she says, I don't have a husband. And he goes, oh, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
You had 5 of them.
Right.
And the one that you're living with now is not your husband. And this lets us know that Jesus can read minds.
Right.
We saw that before when he said when he saw Philip and he said, here's an Israelite was it an Israelite in whom there is no deceit?
Right. And as we stopped at verse 26 there, but if we read on to verse 29, when this woman went back into town, she said, "Come, see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" Then they went out of the city and came to him. So he told her more than that.
Yeah.
He told her all things that I ever did.
Yeah.
And so that's that was what convinced her. And then as we get further on into the outline we're going to talk about, she went back and had a great effect on the people in her village there, in her area. Many people were saved because of her.
Yeah. Well, we could probably just finish up talking about these different things. We don't have to read it all, but one thing I like to point out here is as she goes back to her town. Mm-hmm. As you said, and she says, "Hey, there's this guy. He told me of all the things I ever did." And Jesus goes and he talks to these people, and they all believe believe in him.
Yeah.
Now that's a totally different effect than he had on the Jews.
Right.
And what I like in there, and Jesus says this a couple of different times throughout the scriptures. In verse 44, he says, "For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country."
Right.
And that's today as well.
Yeah. And I was thinking earlier that anybody who's been a parent might also, those words might ring true. That in your own house, sometimes you don't have.
Oh yeah.
As much honor as, and I was thinking about when we're children and we go to school, possibly it is probably more likely than not that we listen to what the teachers say. I've had it happen to me where I've taught my children something, and my children are homeschooled, and I will show them something, maybe a process, and it's rare that I teach them that I'm able to come forth with anything meaningful in math. But anyway, I might show them something and teach them something, and they'll be like, "Well, that's not how that works," and then they'll have to go and and they'll ask mom.
Yeah.
and then realize, well, Dad was right. So that sort of brought me to mind of that. But it's true, and so these people that had Christ right in front of their face,
they believed. They wanted him to stay.
Right.
So Jesus stayed on there 2 days, and then he had to get on going. But I mean,
but the people that he grew up with, the people that he came from,
his family,
they were less likely to listen, and that's something that we need to think about is we and how we react to hearing the gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what would I had a thought here I wanted to mention. Just along those same lines that every person can be profitable to the kingdom. This woman, this Samaritan woman who may have been overlooked by so many, and those with their nose up in the air walking through might not think of anything of her. And we might have those people today in our society that we walk past and think nothing of, and can't think of any reason why anything good could come out of that person. But when they're equipped with the truth and the knowledge of the truth, they can be very, very powerful witnesses for the kingdom. So just don't discount anybody.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you. All right. Well, that probably about wraps it up for today.
Right. Yeah, we're pushing 30 minutes, so we should let these people do something else. But thank you for joining in with us, and we're glad that you chose to watch and to study with us. We hope that you continue, and by all means, if you have any questions, you can type those out in the contact section or comments, however we do that.
Yeah.
And by all means, get in touch with us. We would be glad to study further with you. Hope your day goes well, and we'll see you next time.